Well, hello, Fresno County Office of Education. I am so glad to be able to be in community with you today, even if it's virtual and by recording. I'm so excited that I was invited to participate in your spring webinar. This is an exciting time, to be able to talk about what it means to support families and to really think about family engagement and leadership, and to do that in a culturally affirming way, and to look at a framework and some principles of practice that will help us think about what that can be alongside with parents. And so I'm glad to be with you. I'm Dr. LaWanda Wesley, and I have worked in the field of early education, both as a practitioner, preschool teacher, and also an administrator overseeing childcare programs supporting professional development. But more importantly, I'm also a mother of 5 adult children, and I was able to do that somehow, some way, even as I center myself just to share with you that I was a single mom raising 5 children. And it was because of programs like what you offer in your county that allowed me to be able to persist and move from, rely on subsidy programs to support me, which I was so grateful for, because I couldn't afford childcare on my own once I became a single parent. And just realizing how important that family engagement piece was to me and my success and my own personal journey to moving through getting both my bachelor's, my master's, and my doctorate. So just know you're doing incredible work, and family engagement is a key part of everything that you're doing, and should not be taken lightly. So thank you again for letting me be in community with you and being able to share a framework that is more culturally, I hope, affirming. And maybe it's just adding more to what you already do. Maybe when you hear some of these principles and practices, and you see how we're moving and shifting from decolonizing culturally, moving away from a decolonizing framework. You'll understand a little bit more why this is so critical and important. So the title of my workshop today is Principles of Family Engagement and Leadership, a Decolonizing Culturally Affirming Framework. And I am your facilitator. And I wish I was in community because I am more of a two-way conversationalist, not one way. But here we are, we're making the best of it. So I'm excited to do this with you. So as I advance the next slide, get into it. I just want to just take notice and create a pause for myself as I charge my battery. Take a pause to just notice that it is Black History Month, you guys. And by the time you view this workshop, it will be towards the end of Black History Month. And what a beautiful time to be able to center um, one's culture and celebrate all their contributions and excellence to the overall contributions to American society. All of the inventions and arts and literature and music and food, and there's just so much more. But just want to create that pause, that we are so proud that Black History Month gives us a time in history to be able to just celebrate those who contributed to American history. So yes, happy Black History Month, everyone. And Black history is American history. Our workshop today is taking a look at authentic family engagement and leadership, again, through a decolonizing and affirming framework that is rooted in the culture and capital wealth of families, to support children's learning journeys. And we want to really think about how we set families up for their best success. And I consider this the foundational work before we dive right into the learning pieces of children's, you know, um, engagement with what we do in the classroom environment. And sometimes we kind of we go right to the child because we're so eager to start off the school year, getting as much information and facilitation of learning as we can. But sometimes that rush to do that, it might be an overstep of families not being involved as a partner in that journey. And they are, as we all know, preaching to the choir, children's first educator. So we want to make sure that we have sort of a sequence of things that we do, and family engagement should be the first order of business, as I always say, before we get into the child business of supporting children's learning in our early education settings and our school settings, wherever you're meeting children and families. So I always like to open up family engagement sessions with thinking about a particular tribe in Africa that talks about a greeting. They talk about this traditional greeting that they give each other, that adults give each other when they see each other. Instead of them saying, hi, how are you doing, as we might do here in the US, or any other probably place, this particular culture creates a pause for itself, and they ask, how are the children? And that is their first word and their first engagement. How are the children? Which lays the belief that if the children are well and you respond, the children are well, and then they will say, well, surely if the children are well, then you are well. And they can proceed with the rest of the conversation. But if the question the question is posed and the response to that question, after saying, how are the children? And the response is, the children are not well, then surely you could not be well, because our children are the ecosystem of our community. They are the center of our community. They are our future generation. And so if we're not pouring into them, how could anything else or anyone else around us be okay? So I'm going to play this really quick video that does a much better way of framing what I just framed, but I wanted to give it to you in the way that I came to know this and really appreciate that. So I would like to say to you, as you're watching this piece, how are the children in Fresno? How are they doing? So that is my offering, that is my pause, that is my question to you. And here we go.
Among the most accomplished and fabled tribes of Africa, no tribe was considered to have warriors more fearsome or more intelligent than the mighty Maasai. It is perhaps surprising then to learn the traditional greeting that passed between Maasai warriors, and how are the children? It is still the traditional greeting among the Maasai, acknowledging the high value that the Maasai always place on their children's well-being. Even warriors with no children of their own would always give the traditional answer, all the children are well. Meaning, of course, that peace and safety prevail, that the priorities of protecting the young are in place, that Maasai society has not forgotten its reason for being, its proper functions and responsibilities. All the children are well means that life is good. It means that the daily struggles for existence do not preclude proper caring for their young. I wonder how it might affect our consciousness of our own children's welfare if in our culture we took to greeting each other with this daily question, and how are the children? I wonder if we heard that question and passed it along to each other a dozen times a day, if it would begin to make a difference in the reality of how the children are thought of or cared about in our own country. I wonder if every adult among us, parent and non-parent alike, felt an equal weight for the daily care and protection of all children in our communities, in our towns, in our states, and in our country. And I wonder if we could truly say without hesitation, the children are well. Yes, all the children are well.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me have that moment with you and sharing that video. It is amazing. And if you're going to look for this video, maybe share it in a session with your community. It's entitled "How Are the Children?" So you can search that on YouTube if you like. So again, the question back to you: How are the children in Fresno? And I hope that we can say the children are well. But if in this current moment, that answer is complicated, is being grappled with, is on the path towards the children are well, but we're not quite there, then I'm hoping the rest of this session is a way to interrogate how we can get there, starting first with family engagement. And so in that thinking, I always like to frame my work around justice work, and thinking about this particular quote by Cornel West, for those who have passed on, um, and those who we still labor in, because of, and for those who of us, we're still doing the work to make sure no matter where your children are seated in our educational system, no matter what grade level, no matter what community they reside in, that we can say this statement: when you love people, you hate the fact that they're being treated unjustly. Justice is not simply an abstract concept to regulate institutions, but also a fire in the bones to promote the well-being of all. So we understand that we are interconnected regardless of our walk of life, our background, our culture, our language. We're very interconnected by the mere fact that we are human, and each of our humanity can be seen in each other. When we sit with each other, we dine with each other, we have conversation with each other, when we're connected in our neighborhoods together, and just by the very breath that we take together collectively and individually each and every day. So I leave you with that also. So now we're going to get into it. What does it mean to be culturally sustaining, and thinking about in the family engagement perspective? And so culturally sustaining family engagement um, brings us to a few questions before we really get into it. It's about how responsive we are. And that means that interaction, that touch point, that connection, that nurturing, that cultivation. And sustaining meaning it's not a one and done. It means how do we persist and make sure this is a way of life, and this is something that we are cultivating day in and day out, and that families are a part of that. And so there's a few provocations here before you in the form of a question that I want you to jot down during this session, our 45 minutes together. I want you to hold this question. If you need to get your phone and take a picture of it, please feel free to do that. You'll also have the slide deck as well. But the questions I have for us today, is what am I currently doing in my practice that addresses culturally sustaining practices? What can I try in my practice that I have never done? What did I try and how did it work? And there may be culturally responsive practices before today's session that you've already been exposed to, but what have you tried? How did it go? And are you willing to try it again, even though maybe that first try came with, not your perfect ideal way of doing things? And we want to let go of the perfect because we know it gets in the way of good, right? So we get to our permanent practice. Notice I didn't say perfect practice, permanent practice, permanence, by repeat experiences and then honing that in because of repeating it in trial and error until we refine it and become sort of like taking a second breath. So, and the last question is, what thoughts, feelings, or new insights are standing out for you during this session? Um, Again, there might be things that are affirming to you because you're already familiar, and there may be some things that are completely new, or it's a reframe for you. If it's not new, you're like, I'm thinking about it in a new lens. We're in a new moment. I'm in a new classroom, I'm with a new administrator, I am that administrator, I am that practitioner. I have a new family that I'm really trying to reach. We can have the same knowledge of practices, but it's situational because we're always moving in different points of time. So just please feel free to wrestle with some of these questions. We're going to revisit them at the end as well. So I happen to be grateful to be part of a community, Oakland Starting Smart and Strong, in the Bay Area, has a community called the 10 Promising Practices for Boys of Color. And the 10 Promising Practices for Boys of Color was birthed out of a work group that wanted to sort of explore why Black boys were experiencing such high rates of expulsion suspension as young as preschool. And it was persisting through even elementary, but particularly in the early learning settings. And it was across settings in the school district, in family childcare home settings, and community-based early learning settings, and also, in upper grade levels. And they were noticing a pattern. And during my time in Oakland Unified School District, we wanted to come together as a community to have a really hard and frank discussion about what it was we were seeing and what we were going to do to disrupt. And we were very cognizant to also make sure that we brought in males to have the discussion, because many of us in the early education field happen to identify as women. And we were talking about experiences of young Black boys, but not one of us had that lived experience of actually, growing up as a young Black boy. So having Black men in particular talk about this experience, and even other men of color come in and share their experience, because they also said they were experiencing differences in these settings, or their children were, or they, or as teachers, were grappling with how to bring along other educators to make sure that we were promoting best practices when working with our boys and boys of color, in particular, in this case, Black boys. And so we developed these 10 promising practices, and we have there's these 4 pillars, but one of the pillars is family engagement. And within family engagement are these 2 practices of the 10 promising practices. And you'll see here on the screen, it's about building practice number 3, about building, trusting, and reciprocal partnerships with families of boys of color, and to include parents and caretakers in all aspects of our programming in school settings and in the planning. And they're at the beginning and not the middle and not the end. They are the drivers, they are the co-designers, the co-planners. And we use a term that is like co-powering, not to empower, because who are we to say that we are going to give parents agency? We know that families are already gifted with a lot of knowledge about their own children. They're gifted about the knowledge and wealth and capital of their community. They're gifted in their cultural knowledge and understanding and responsiveness, because they move in community. They know how to respond in community, and that is a capital, cultural capital, that some of us may not be afforded. And then promising practice number 4 is to secure partnerships to support boys of color and their families. And so if our boys of color community, inclusive of their parents, say that we need certain supports, how do we leverage partnerships across community to make sure that those needs can be met? And that we listen to parents to make that happen. And so as we sit here in this particular session around culturally affirming practices for families, that's more broad than just looking at boys of color, the same invitation would apply. Are we building trusting relationships that are reciprocal? And we use a lot of this lingo in a lot of our work, but I just want us to just sit with this, and it's an invitation. What does two-way partnerships look like for you? Um, are we leading the conversations out front? Are we doing more telling than having families really inform us of what it is that they want? So, with that said, there is this notion of how we can think about reframing, maybe some of the pitfalls that we have fallen into as educators. I know I have, and I know I have done it in my early career. And what we want to do is move away from anything that's not culturally affirming, that places the family at the forefront, not the middle, not at the end, but at the very beginning of designing what it is that they want. And we're disrupting sort of these how we call decolonizing frameworks, where we are here to save you, we are here to pour the best into you, we are assuming you don't come with strengths and assets. And when you come with that mindset, when I have come with that mindset, then there's a lot I need to do to get you ready. There's a lot I need to do to engage you. And so I'm constantly talking at you and not talking with you, or doing less of the talking and doing more of the listening. So this framework comes out of, actually, who got national attention, and he's right in our own backyard here in California, particularly in Sacramento. I think for Lazo, came out of Burbank High School, but he started wondering this concept around family involvement versus family engagement. And you can look him up. He's done a lot of work in this space. And again, if you can invite him into your space, I recommend it, because he's phenomenal. I've got to hear him speak on some of the YouTube sessions, but just to hear him speak, one-on-one is another opportunity just to ask questions in community. But nonetheless, he says this. He says, simply put, parent involvement is often more of doing to, while engagement is doing with. So catch that. Parent involvement is more of doing to than doing with. And with involvement, schools tend to lead with their mouth, generally telling parents what they should be doing. Engagement, on the other hand, has schools leading with their ears. By listening to parents and family members' ideas, and by eliciting from them what they have found that works best for their children, it is then, and I would add, that we can develop a more genuine partnership. And maybe, looking at the questions that we have posed at the beginning of this particular session, have you found yourself doing most of the talking? And even when you say, I invite you to share with me about your child, but even in the sharing of the child, you somehow have hijacked that conversation. And so now the sharing has come more about how you identify with them, which is fine, because it's great to share how you have like shared lived experience, because that does build community. But does that end up taking away from what they wanted to share? School systems already, for some, particularly those communities of color, can feel like a place that has dominance over their voice, over their children, because of histories and legacies we are not going to dive in today. But they are still with us. They still live with us. It takes a lot of disruption and pausing to overcome that. And you can do that just by the very way that you invite families to say, this school is your school. This is your child's classroom. This is not my classroom. This is not my school. This is your classroom. This is your school. That becomes our school, our collective. And they have to be more than just words. It has to be the actions behind it. So with that, we wanted to give like really some examples of what family involvement is. Again, the doing for. It is based on deficit thinking. It is that school-centric approach that schools identify all the projects and all the goals and then tell parents they then can contribute. So we've already laid out the plans, we've done this because in that sense of urgency and rush, we talk about, disrupting, dominant culture in dominant ways. And sometimes the need to get things done swiftly and quickly and efficiently means going so fast that we're leaving people behind. And in this case, those people are the most central people, and it's family. If you want to be more intentional, sometimes you still can go fast, but sometimes you have to go slow in the beginning to get to the fast. Meaning if you lay the groundwork and the foundation, you're going to get there. So think about that. What kind of school-centric approaches are you doing that looks like this? The one-way communication, where does that happen? Is it just our newsletters? Is it some of the text feature apps that we have to communicate with parents? We use different ways to get information out really quick. But are some of those features allowing parents to give you information back? Does it allow them to lead out front first? And again, you may have these in place, but if you don't, think about where there is two-way communication opportunities. How consistent and frequent is that? Focus on what happens here. Some of the parent events are predominantly planned and implemented by the school staff and or by so-called outside experts. So we're always expertising over families. We need an expert for this, and we need an expert for that. What if we started to really turn that upside down and say, parents, you are that expert. Can you be the one to provide that talk? Can you lead that talk on what it is to navigate resources in this community? And they be the lead. And what we do is resource those families. I have a colleague at Hayward Unified School District, shout out to Mitchell Ha, who does this so well. And what he does, and Christina Adams, who's now retired, what they did and continue to do is make sure their parent advisory committee is well resourced. And so the food is there, they have the building, it's open, it's clean, it's beautiful, but the families are planning and leading, they are giving financial resources to get the things that they need for each family event. What an outside, flip-flop. They're not, the families can go shop for some of these things, but if a family says, hey, we don't have that time, here's the list, they give us the list, and then we provide that service to them, or they can do it for themselves. But it's a conversation, a dialogue that isn't a one-way conversation of doing for instead of doing with. So these are just examples. Also, family engagement. Now, as we look to what does engagement look like, it's strength-based, it's asset informed. It's acknowledging a wider range of beliefs and action that parents and family members do support their children. There's some beliefs that, within different cultures, that they don't care so much about their children's education because maybe they're working 2 or 3 jobs. So when they show up or can't show up or show up late, they have prioritized Maslow needs, putting food on the table, keeping the lights on, and that school is a critical part of the everyday life for both the children and the families. But let me tell you something, if I can't eat, my child brain can't be online. If my child doesn't have shelter, my child can't be their best self. And so really starting to understand what does family engagement look like and not believing that the child and the family don't have an investment in their academic careers and their school careers. And you will know that by engaging in two-way conversation. And so as we move down the doing with, a willingness to go beyond families' interests and concerns within the 4 walls of the program or your school system. acknowledging pressing issues within the community families' lives. Are there things taking place in the community that are external to the four walls of that school that we are not considering, that we have not asked, that we are not listening for, that we are not being respectful of, that then shows up in the microsystem of that classroom, of that program, of your setting? Really, we are human beings that are holistic. And so what happens outside the four walls of a school system, of our classroom, impacts how I show up. We know that kids and families can get very dysregulated by certain events. And we know we're in a current event right now. Regardless of which side of the aisle or which side, if you're, the blue, the green, the yellow, the orange, I don't even care. We're human beings in a current moment in time right now. That may not affect one person, but affect another. And if we don't hold one another's humanity and how that looks, then we're dismissing and missing the opportunities to really figure out how to be connected and understand that if someone is showing up, a family, a child, even some of us as educators in the space feeling dysregulated, um, we cannot be a collective. So just holding space, we don't even have to agree. We can say, I can see that is hard for you. I'm hearing what you're saying, that's hard for you. Even if I don't have the same lived experience, even if that affects me differently, that humanity, right? And then thinking about power sharing that supports parent and family voice and agency. Stop hoarding the microphone. Stop it. Let it go. Turn over the mic. Build succession planning and family engagement that honors parents' strengths. And so with that said, I want us to think about some pivots and some moves, moving from deficit thinking to reframing. So some of these deficit pitfalls you'll see, it's to my left, probably to your right. I'm left-handed, so things get left brain, right brain. But deficit, you got expulsion, suspension, chronic absenteeism, lowest performing students, below standards, low income, the othering that happens, them over there, or we even other within culture, outside of culture, I'm here, you're there. So there's a lot, historical and persistent intergenerational trauma. To some of these, think about the reframe that, some of our kids come with what we call verb. I want you to look up that. Look up verb, and we'll hopefully take a look at that a little bit more. But these kids that come with a lot of energy, excitement, spirit, they're energetic. And you're still trying to get them to sit still, crisscross applesauce, hands in lap, back up straight. I only call on you when your hands are raised. Where is there opportunity to really understand that within some cultures, kids really move about in their community, they're talking with adults. It's not children are, seen but not heard. So really giving some thought about, are there opportunities in your program where kids can have access to different ways of moving and regulating their bodies to become regulated so that they can have that learning time where they are on task and they are engaged. But that's not considered disruptive behavior because you created outlets. Are there opportunities for indoor and outdoor experience throughout the day where they can run out that energy, right? I used to run when I worked with a group of boys in my preschool program. Besides the outdoor time we had, sometimes we would just go run outdoors and run around a particular tree that was out in front of our classroom, because I knew my boys needed that, right? Do we see culturally affirming teaching and learning dispositions and practices? I think we do a better job of that ever before, particularly here in California, but are we doing that consistently? When we think about kids as lowest performing students or kids who are the achievement gap, I would ask us to reframe that and think about people of excellence, children coming from legacy. Some of us come from histories of people who were of royalty. So it doesn't, when we hear other people talking about us in these deficit pitfalls, it's contrary to what we talk about, how we talk about ourselves in community. It's such a mismatch. So when you're saying that in front of them or using these deficit languages, we almost can't compute. It's like, I don't know what you're saying. You must be living in a different world. And you may be thinking of us as living in a different world. And I always have to be reminded of that when I'm with families as well. They come from such rich histories full of excellence and pride and achievements and accomplishment. Do we take time to learn those accomplishments of those particular people and their history before we frame them in a deficit? And just because folks have framed them in such a deficit for centuries doesn't mean that's their beginning history. We have to go back to when people were, all thriving to really understand where they're rooted from, right? So let's interrogate that a little bit more and do a little more understanding and reading and researching to know why there's such a dissonance between what you're saying and what that culture believes about themselves. And then resourcefulness and thrivance despite the odds. And so instead of saying they're low income, or they're poverty stricken, or, again, these deficit, seeing that families are showing up every day, however they show up, despite their circumstances, even if they're meeting the definition of McKinney-Vento's definition of being unhoused. Did they show up today? I mean, they came. How resourceful was it for them to be able to figure out how to show up? I want us to really think about that and the resilience it took to be present. When we think about our people of different cultures, how are they visible in our community as trendsetters? How are they remarkable in comparison to other cultures? I don't mean comparison like good or bad. I mean like this culture brings this gift, this particular culture brings these assets, and then we start to mesh them together. What a collective tapestry we have and fabric we're starting to weave. And then starting to just think about restorative healing justice. And this work you can is being lifted up by a particular researcher, Dr. Warren, who's starting to look at what we call the reframing of deficit norms that have been placed in our school settings and in our society. So in that same vein, I want us to start to think about something that's called the 5-to-1 ratio. And the 5-to-1 ratio says really for every one negative you might have for a particular child, family member, I want you to try to negate it or with disrupt it with 5 positives. So you guys know this in our, if you've been a coach in the field, you guys know this concept. So it reads on the screen, research shows that in order to cultivate nurturing, trusting relationships with others, the ratio focusing on strength versus deficit should be 5-to-1. That is at least 5 positive interactions for every negative one. So create the pause for every negative thought I might have enter in my noggin here. I might want to figure out how I can counteract that with 5 positives. And maybe this is a self-reflective journal, right? This is an exercise. This is a practice. So again, something to think about. I've been starting to think about within my own particular culture, and I'll have a few more examples just because it's Black History Month, y'all, and I can't help but to lean into culture. But starting to think about that. What does it look like to wonder why children within particular cultures do so well when they are affirmed in their own cultures? And we know in historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, they're exposed to curriculum and instruction and facilitation of learning seated in their own culture. And this is true of also Hispanic serving institutions. And so we know when that happens, um, there's a thrivance that is particularly something we might want to create a pause and pay attention to. And one college in particular that's a historically Black college is Howard University. And this university produces 80% of the Black doctors in the US. And I've been like, why is that? And you'll see on the screen, there's a little statement that is posed here. It said from a particular student, she says, as a Howard student, and she was a medical student. She said, I was surrounded by Black physicians everywhere I turned, from interacting with the school administration to shadowing at the institution's safety net hospital. The presence of Black role models fulfilled a mental imagery for what I could become and heavily influenced my decision to pursue medicine. So there's something about image, there's something about shadowing, there's something about presence, there's something about exposure to curriculum, other physicians who've come before this particular young person, that affirm that they were on the right track. So could we do this in our own settings? I believe so. Yes, we could do this in our own settings. How are we exposing our children from all different cultural backgrounds to their own culture? How do we mirror that back to them? And we could do this at the youngest age. We don't have to wait till they graduate out of high school onto college to get this exposure, or they may never get this exposure. How can we see this for them now? It's just something, again, for us to interrogate. In this particular, I'm going to actually create a pause. I want to talk about a particular Brian Wright has done some work by the NAACP. In his work in the NAACP, he's authored a number of articles, and I'm trying to see I stopped scared. He's authored a number of articles. Let's see if I can bring that up or not. A number of articles around working with boys of color. And in working with boys of color, he realized a couple of things that was of particular interest. And before I do that, actually, I'm going to share another proof point about, if I can get there. Sorry, guys. Another proof point of why historically Black colleges are so critical to the work that we do, on a daily basis. Sorry, I was trying to find I actually lost my slide deck. So I feel really bad, but I'm gonna find it. Give me grace. He shares a proof point of why Black boys, you need to have what we call verb. And so in that particular work, they talk about these sort of learning preferences that the culture has. And so I'm going to bring it up right now. But one of them is looking at children who are bodily kinesthetic. And when they're bodily kinesthetic, and they move in a particular way that might be bothersome to others. And it's like, no, this is just part of, again, when I talked about that children of certain cultures are always constantly sort of like on the move. That could be problematic and be considered disruptive behavior. So just making space for that. I found my place, everyone. Here we go. But making space for that. And the other piece that comes up is thinking about children and how they are part of having ongoing dialogue within community. And they're collaborators, they're creative expressionists, they are very tactile. Not only does Brian Wright does this work, but an author named Dr. Deborah uh, Ren Etta Sullivan, who talks about when you're working with African American children, keep some of these tenets in mind, these learning preferences in mind. Um, they are the interdependence and communal people. They um, like to talk and do things in community, and that comes from our deep history of moving in like tribal ways, and they haven't left us. And then we're very spiritual people. I don't mean religious per se, but they are we're people that will tune into our spiritual nature, our interconnectedness. We are connected to our mind, body, and our souls. And so just that sort of spirituality. We like to be mentally and physically challenged. We don't do well with hypotheticals. Realism is best. So if you give us a lot of hypotheticals, including our children, do not do well. We need the actual real. You hear us say, give us the real. It's even like a little saying. And then social environment, thinking about what that looks like, verbal, very communicative folks were lots of talking and more concept on the verb. I'm going to go back a little bit. The reason why this is so important to do this sort of seeping in for all cultures, but I'm going back to historically Black colleges and universities, you get these results. 85% of those who go to these type of environments are doctors. They turn out to be judges. Um, they are military officers, not, they advance in our military system. They become veterans, pharmacists, attorneys. You could go on. So just want to give you this more around what it means to be culturally affirming as I start to come to a close is just thinking about being culturally grounding, sorry, and having racial pride, looking at history on a regular basis, not just during a particular month or week, but just making that as part of your main curriculum. Again, I think we're doing a lot better in this space, but just maybe do an audit. Are you doing it in your program, in your setting? Maybe talk with other colleagues, other administrators, practitioners. Having a social responsibility and culture, we hold each other accountable for the work. So we are civically engaged. If you invite us to be civically engaged in the classroom, in the school setting, we will find a way. If we can't do it, we will find someone else to do it. But if you do not invite us, you don't welcome us, we will not. We will not. So ask, invite in loving ways, nurturing ways. Truly, we will show up. Educate the whole child, emotional, physical, intellectual. And I just shared back in this previous way that we like all parts of us to be stimulated. So keeping that in mind. Representation of educators that look like them. Again, I already shared an example why that's important. We don't see ourselves in the folks who are instructing us. It's hard. We're not, because we can't learn from others who don't share our same identity. But it goes even so much further when we can, or if it's done in partnership, right? It can even be something that's in partnership with someone who doesn't share the same culture with someone who does. So can there partnerships be formed? Thinking about at-home school connection, we tend to learn much better when we're in culturally affirming environments that isn't, and I'm going to name it, predominantly white. Our North America, United States, or I should say United States is predominantly a white dominant culture in terms of the way our education was set up. It was set up on that structure, but we have changed and the demographics have shifted, and you can't still apply that same pedagogy to a people who are much different than a period that no longer is here anymore. Those were the 1800s, 1800s. We are now, in the 21st century. So what does that look like? Academic excellence with celebratory milestones along the way. We need to know that we are doing well along the way. So if you wait till the end, we don't know. So giving us celebratory opportunities throughout the entire year. Our cultures like to celebrate anything and everything at all times, all throughout the day, if you give it to us, right?